Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode. This one is for the Visions and Vibes chapter, where we talk about how we hold our visions and keep our healing vibes aligned. I have my co host, Adam, and I am so thrilled that we have Dr. Catherine Clinton with us today. She is an author, an educator, a licensed naturopathic physician who healed herself from two autoimmune conditions and Lyme disease while in medical school by learning how quantum biology is connected to the world around us. Her mission is to empower as many people as possible with sharing that a relationship with the dirt beneath our feet, the sun, the wind, the water, the plants, the seasons, and each other. That is the real medicine. Please welcome Dr. Catherine Clinton.
Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to talk with you both.
Mm.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just, in our introductions, again, just another heartfelt expression of appreciation and gratitude to take the time to join April and I today. We're really excited to connect and tap into your wealth of knowledge and experience. For our followers, I think April and I have kind of taken the approach that, we're Healy members, so we've tapped into that kind of frequency community. And I think I, for one, have been captivated by your content online and some of the classes and webinars that you're offering as well. So really ties in, I think, with the fact that April and I are just trying to guide our audience to different modalities in terms of healing and what our bodies can do. And, we're just beyond thrilled to have you join us today to kick off our 2024 series. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be fun.
So even just a first question, like I shared a little introduction, but can you share a bit of your story, maybe three turning points that have led you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I was an undergraduate doing a degree in philosophy, and that's where I met my midwife. She became my midwife after I shadowed with her, apprenticed with her for years and years. And she was actually the first one that kind of opened my eyes to natural healing, to quantum healing. And I knew pretty quickly that midwives are cut from a different cloth. I needed that close sign at night where she is just incredible and able to do these births after births. And it was sort of like church for me. I knew going into it pretty quickly that I wasn't going to be a midwife, but I really, really enjoyed the education that I was receiving, the experience and the knowledge that I was receiving. And so that kind of opened up. So what do I do if I'm not going to be a midwife? And I decided to go back and get all my naturopathic medical prerequisites, all my organic chemistry and anatomy and physiology, all those things you need. And I went to naturopathic medical school. And it was my second year of medical school. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto thyroiditis, an autoimmune condition that affects the thyroid gland, and ulcerative colitis, an autoimmune condition, another one that affects the GI tract. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. I mean, so many different things. It was like a domino effect. And I was in the perfect place to heal. I was in naturopathic medical school, so I had all those modalities. I was working with the allopathic medical school, teaching hospital up the hill, across the river. There was an acupuncture school. So I had all these tools, but um, there's something that happens when we heal from a chronic disease. I was debilitated, and from going to debilitated to productive again is a wonderful experience. I mean, that's really, really wonderful. But at the same time, it wasn't the optimum of health. And that's when I found psychoneuroimmunology, how our thoughts and emotions impact our health, and quantum biology, how the world around us kind of impacts those very small pieces of our biology, giving rise to what we see around us with our eyes.
Wow, that's so poetic. and informative. Oh, I guess with your learnings, what was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
I think, I started learning about psychoneuroimmunology, how our thoughts impact our immune system, our physiology overall, because the physician who was actually my physician at the time, and I was following her on clinical rotations, and she was pushing me to look at psychoneuroimmunology. And I was like, don't you have a different acupuncture treatment or a different herb? Let's not examine my emotional state. And she was right. Of course, it's really this ripple of energy that affects every single process in the body, right? And I think that was a difficult but beautiful lesson, really looking at some of my own just knee-jerk reactions to things. And at the time, the people around me, myself, would describe me as very calm, very nurturing. But I realized that, so many of us come into this world with epigenetic patterns, or by the age of 7, Bruce Lipton does an amazing job explaining how we have this subconscious train of thought we're not even really aware of, right? And so examining all those things, while it wasn't a spa day, it was a beautiful lesson in how humanity works, how humans work, how we can hold space for all those different emotions. So many in the healing space talk about gratitude and love and positivity, which are wonderful, right? Of course, I'm not knocking those, but to hold space for some of those more difficult emotions and accept them and invite them in when they come was a beautiful medicine that I think our society really is lacking. Our society is really uncomfortable with hard emotions,
Yeah,
emotions in general, right?
sure. Yeah, we've kind of, I think, in a general sense, lost that mind-body connection a little bit. But not only that, I think you tapped into the idea of the contrast as well, which I think speaks to April and I for sure. And just understanding that there is lots to be gained from those shadow aspects as well, right? I think the more you can kind of lean into those opportunities and areas to learn more about yourself, cultivate a better understanding of self, I think also tends to healing as well, right? So I completely agree with you. My wife and I talk often about embracing the contrasts in life, and that's what kind of invokes the beauty of the spectrum of this human experience as well, right? So beautiful share. Thank you for that. Um, so I'm excited to tap into this field of quantum biology and pick your brain about it. So why don't you share with us a little bit, like, high level, what does that actually mean, and how can we impact our health and our energy through quantum biology?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So quantum biology is the study of quantum phenomenon in living systems. So we're talking about quantum entanglement, where two particles are separated by a distance, but they are inseparable in nature. Quantum tunneling, superposition, where a particle takes multiple paths at one time. Quantum coherence, where things work at the same frequency. And, you know, quantum biology is a really new and emerging field, but it was something that was theorized by the very first quantum physicists, right? When quantum physics got its birth at the turn of the 19th century, it was something that they were talking about and theorizing about. And it wasn't until the early 2000s that evidence started coming up. Greg Engel and Graham Fleming were the first to really show that our living systems, that chaos that quantum physicists said, a living system is too warm, it is too noisy, there's too much vibration and chaos in the living system. And what those researchers found was that actually it is the chaos of a living system that creates the coherence needed for some of those quantum phenomenon to happen. And so just really on a simple explanation, quantum biology is the study of how electrons, protons, photons from light, phonons from sound, frequency information, how these things impact our biology at a very, very, very small scale, yet give rise to what we see with our eyes around us, what we might see on a lab report or in a doctor's office, symptoms, right? And so it's this beautiful sort of circle. And one of the things I love about quantum biology is when you reduce it down to these small pieces, rather than it becoming reductionistic and putting things in their separate boxes, you start to realize how united it all is, how interconnected it all is.
Wow.
I'm just like
Yeah,
leaning
beautifully
in.
articulated. Yeah, I know, me too. I'm captivated.
Ah,
Beautifully
this is
articulated.
so exciting. And for you to be, yeah, an expert in this field, I I guess with my research and how I'm learning to educate myself with the energy and frequency. And I guess I'm reading this book by Marcus Schmieke, the creator of healing. He was a quantum physicist that became a monk for 12 years, but he also is studying like all the history of even the psychologists and the physicists, and with Carl Jung, and he's starting to even see how it's all interconnected. And I love how you're talking about entanglement. So with this book that I'm reading, it does talk about, mind over matter, but like even putting psychology over physics. And that sounds like it's like connected to how when you're like, yeah, um, our thoughts affect our body. So I guess in a simple term, is there a way that you can explain this to somebody who's like, what? Mind over matter, psychology? Like, what's a simple way to educate, to let this message land to someone who is still learning about themselves and how to heal themselves?
Right, right, right. When we use all these big terms, it's kind of like, what are they talking about? But I think we've all experienced this so many times when we have a thought of anger, that immediate rise in blood pressure and all those physical symptoms happen instantaneously, right? Same thing with love or gratitude or sadness, right? Those tears come instantly. We don't have to wait for this multiple step process to happen. And what's happening is that those emotions evoke several different things. They evoke cytokines throughout the body, chemical messengers. They evoke different neurotransmitters. They evoke different immune reactions. And some would say that our thoughts have a certain resonance as well. John Stuart Reid talks about how inelastic collisions and the molecules that are colliding when our neurons have a thought create this sound, this infrared energy, this frequency that then can travel throughout the body. And it's this amazing idea of the instantaneous reaction that happens with emotions. And so psychoneuroimmunology is something that's been around, and there's just a wealth of research and information out there, but it sort of validates what we've always known to be true. When we have an emotion, we can feel it in our body instantaneously. It isn't something that needs to travel down a road, right? It's an instant reaction. And so becoming aware of that, and especially in the medical field, to have doctors and practitioners aware of how our emotions play into disease picture. I mean, think how different our doctor office visits would be if doctors held appreciation for the role that they play in that. You know, you're really holding your patient's heart in your hand, emotionally speaking. And so that is such a privilege, honor, and a responsibility that we need to understand as practitioners.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I envision that would be like a beautiful goal of mine to see that come to fruition from a clinical standpoint, right? To be treated at that level. And I suspect too, like there's a lot of information around how inflammation in the body is also related to your emotional experience and things like that. So to me, this all makes beautiful sense. But I think again, you've just articulated it in such a graceful and a beautiful way. So thank you for sharing that. And as April mentioned, I think for people that are not as familiar with some of the more, I guess, technical terms and things like that, it's nice to have the opportunity to kind of learn from someone using kind of different language and a different approach. But that's beautiful. And I suspect too that also kind of relates to our fascia network as well, and the interconnectedness of how our even our tissues are responding within the network and the information that's traveling within our body. Um, can you maybe dive into that a little bit? Because again, that's another area that just intrigues me so much, is just that kind of the communication of our fascia network and how important it is to kind of tend to that and understand how that interconnectedness affects our healing and our health.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when I was in naturopathic medical school, you know, in cadaver labs, fascia was something that you would remove to get to the real thing, right? It was this useless scaffolding. And that's kind of what's still being taught in medical schools. And what we're finding out is that it's anything but useless, right? This fascia is connective tissue made mostly out of collagen, and it connects to every structure in our body. It can connect via integrins into the cell cytoskeleton. I mean, it's just this vast body-wide network. And when you look at what's happening with that collagen of the fascia, is we're kind of familiar with our DNA creating a double helix. What's happening with the collagen of the fascia is it's creating this triple helix. And this triple helix is called tropocollagen, and it creates these tubules at a very, very small level. So they're actually termed tropocollagen nanotubules. And these tubules are very sensitive. Our collagen is like a liquid crystal. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, the reason we can have this beautiful conversation on our TV screens, our computer screens, our smartphone screens is because of liquid crystal technology. Liquid crystal technology is a kind of mesophase between a liquid and a solid, and all of the molecules are oriented in a certain direction. And when electricity comes into that, they orient in a different formation. So when we're talking about our screens, this is something that happens, and as those things move, as the liquid crystal realigns, it lets in a different amount of light, and that's how we get our pictures, right? That's how I see your guys' beautiful faces, and we're able to have this conversation. But when we're talking about the fascia, we're talking about how it communicates. Our fascia is piezoelectric. And so just like a quartz crystal, if we compress our fascia with movement or manually with massage or fascial release, it creates an electrical current. And so the entire thing is oriented and responding to electricity, to light, to sound. It's a very sensitive communication network that spans the body. Not only that, it has this really intimate relationship with the water that forms on the outside of these tubules and the inside of these tubules, something that Gerald Pollack and his team out of the University of Washington first identified. Researchers had been you know, theorizing about it for decades and decades, but he was the first one to kind of pin it down under a microscope. And this water is more gel-like, it's viscous, and it builds with infrared energy, which is what we create when we move our fascia. And as this structured water, or fourth phase of water, like Gerald Pollack's book calls it, some of the research calls it easy water or cell-bound water, as it builds, it kicks out a positively charged proton. And so you have the negative water against the cell or the fascia, and then this positive zone of water right outside of it. And that separation of charge, like a 9-volt battery, creates power. And that's what Pollock found as well. He put an electrode in this negative structured water and one in the positive water that's right outside of it. And it was enough to light an LED light bulb. So it, it actually generates energy. And again, he's done so much research, it's hard to get away from his name. He did another research with a collagen tubule and found that with the presence of infrared energy, the structured water forms on the outside as well as the inside of the tubule, and it propels water and particles and protons through the tube. So we start to understand fascia as this body-wide communication network, much, much different than what we learned and is still being taught in medical schools about our fascia.
Amazing.
That's fascinating. And like, even
Yeah,
just,
see, go ahead,
yeah,
April.
because
Go ahead. Yeah,
because I got my with my kinesiology degree, we did see cadavers, and yeah, they stripped all the fascia, and I'm like, wow, that is so essential to understand. And doing my yoga teacher training, my yoga teacher talked about fascia, like how everything's connected. And for the medical people, like not even getting educated about what you're learning, what you're sharing with us right now, with the water, the tubules, and the charge. And like going back to I guess the energy, that we are like these batteries, we are electric, and like I saw that you have this course about like the structure of water and how it is connected to our nervous system. Can you share and elaborate why we need to understand the importance of water and how it affects our nervous system?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'm glad we talked about fascia, because I think that that relationship is important to understand, that our fascia is covering those nerves. There is an intimate relationship, an inseparable relationship between our fascia and our nervous system. They are really intertwined. And so this structured water, um, that we've been talking about is really important for understanding how that flow works, right? I was talking just yesterday to a class about how when we are stretching our fascia and really thinking, gentle stretches, bringing in that water, making sure we're hydrated, what we should also be doing is making space for those emotions, right? Just that flow of emotion, that flow of sort of a nervous system reset that can happen by moving our fascia, by being hydrated, and by allowing, like we started this conversation, allowing those emotions to come in, not pushing them away, not splintering them, and blame and shame and all that stuff that is so common with some of these bigger emotions, and just um, allowing that flow of energy to happen. And so many ancient indigenous cultures talked about this, and all the research that I point to is wonderful. I'm so glad that it's coming up, but really it's kind of validating what we always knew, as humans. And it's just an interesting sort of full circle return to that intuitive knowing that many of the ancient cultures had.
Yes, of course. That's another thing my wife and I talk about often, is just coming back into that knowledge of self and that connection to our earth and our environment and our ecosystem internally and externally. it's already within us. It's just kind of returning to that knowing. But to me, that just connects everything and completely explains why things like the sound frequency bowls. I'm big into the crystal bowls and frequency devices like the Healy, and things like that make sense to me. They do speak to me and align for me in terms of an opportunity to heal my body, heal my system in a different way. So we talked about structured water. I know April has talked about there's a Healy device to, I guess, structure frequency into the water. But do you have any tips or recommendations? Like, how does one? I hear about hydrogenated water as well. There's devices that will hydrogenate your water. Is this something that we should be exploring in terms of structured water?
Well, I think that, it's a little bit different when we're talking about drinking water. What we were talking about is the water inside of us, right? And how it forms against these hydrophilic, these water-loving surfaces, right? Like our cells, our fascia, our DNA. They're not hydrophobic. They don't repel the water. The water can come up and form this different phase of water. But in a glass of water, what we see, Albert St. Georgi, Gilbert Ling, Emilio Del Gice, they all sort of talked about these different domains in that water and how we can add energy into the water to create more, some called it coherent water, more energized water. Some people are calling it structured water or imprinted water. And I think that it's interesting to note, while there are all these different approaches and machines and all, you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars here. The principle is the same for the water that's in our body. Infrared energy, when we put that energy into the system, whether the system is a glass of water or our body, that builds that different phase of water. So it doesn't necessarily need to be something that is expensive. And, that's not to say, not trying to knock those, but I just want people to know, if there's someone listening like, oh my gosh, this is so far out of reach, it really isn't. It's something that we can all do, and if we're hydrated, then we can structure the water within us. Movement creates that infrared energy. Mitochondrial health creates that infrared energy. The final complex of the electron transport chain spins and creates infrared energy. Snuggling, it's cold here in the Pacific Northwest, and throwing a blanket on and snuggling up to someone that you love creates that infrared energy. Of course, there's infrared devices and saunas, which are great, but a blanket and someone you like is a wonderful way to help increase that infrared energy and potentially help that structured water within us.
Amazing. Thank you for clarifying. That
Oh,
explains why I love my cuddle puddles with my wife and kids for sure.
yeah. And for you to even just simplify that it is accessible, I think that's why I love your IG account so much, because you're talking about grounding, you're talking about water, the benefits of even the sun, but you're like, even just moving the body and hugging that oxytocin, you know what I mean? Like, you're saying that creates the infrared light. And I guess my little umbrella of this podcast is move with love, whether it's moving energy, moving the body, because grew up as a dancer and did the yoga. And so I'm like, oh, it works. We move our body, we're creating that infrared, and we're actually changing the water, which is changing our fascia. I mean, like the tubules, which is changing the fascia. Is this correct? You're like repeating it? Is the message landing is what I wanted to just double check.
Yep, absolutely. It's all about the movement, moving that fascia, moving that energy, moving the lymph, moving the nervous system. They're
Mm.
all connected, and that flow is so important to, I love that. Move with love. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I guess, what is a message that you hope people learn from your courses, from your IG presence, from from you, what is your hope?
I hope that people start to understand that it's really our relationships that can bring such healing, right? Our relationships with our own internal dialogue, our relationship with the sun, right? The biggest source of infrared energy, with the earth. You mentioned grounding. I love talking about that. Our relationship with the seasons, with nature, with the people in our life, all of these things, with the food, all of these relationships really cultivate healing in our life. And so oftentimes our society is looking for the latest and greatest. And I fall trapped to that too, especially with research. And it's so interesting to find, like, oh, okay, another article about how light is important, or sound, or love, or a deep breath, sleep. So it's these relationships, these foundational relationships we evolved over millennia with, that really can bring such immense healing. And we've sort of walked away from that in our modern day life. And I hope people start to remember that and take back their health.
That's beautiful. I think that kind of encapsulates. Usually we sign off with, what's your big vision for 2024 and beyond? I think maybe you captured some of that there, but in our final moments, like what do you see as your big vision for 2024 and beyond?
I would say just that, in concentric circles, like rippling out, so that that is something that we find in doctors' offices, that we find in conversations with our children, that we find in schools. I mean, everywhere there is a desperate need to kind of shift that needle back to real ways, accessible ways that we can um, really improve our health, whether it's emotionally, mentally, physically. There's a place for it everywhere. So my hope is that it ripples out as far as we can get it.
Amazing. And thank you so much for leading the charge and blazing the trail in that regard. And, just sharing your wealth of knowledge with us so that those circles can grow, and your ripple effect is growing exponentially. And I just want to say thank you so much for that, and the impact that you're having, and looking forward to being witness to that ripple effect that you're building. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Yes,
Well,
and
thank
where can our audience find you, connect with you? What is lighting you up? Is it a course that we can send our audience, or what are your favorite links that you would love to share with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Dr. Catherine Clinton. I didn't get creative with it. That's my website. That's where you can find me on YouTube or social media. And I have lots of free information on my website. I teach courses as well. So feel free to check it out and continue the conversation with me. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for helping spread this message. It needs to get out, and doing the work that you both do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And April, as always, what a way to start our adventure here in 2024. But again, ladies, I appreciate you both so much. And for everybody listening, we appreciate your energy and your contribution to this collective expansion as well. So
Mhm.
until we meet again, I just would say keep the visions aligned.
And the healing vibes aligned. Namaste.
Thank you.